Okay, so picture this. Brooklyn loft, exposed brick, rain hammering against the oversized windows, the kind of relentless city storm that mirrors the tempest brewing inside me. Jessica. That's me. And Ben? Ben's the walking, talking demolition crew that bulldozed through my life and left a crater where my heart used to be. We're done. Finished. Finito. Except for Leo, our little guy, finally dozing in his crib, blessedly unaware of the nuclear fallout zone his parents' relationship has become. Co-parenting. The new black, isn't it? Sounds so amicable, so grown up. Except it feels like a Cold War in my own apartment. It's passive-aggressive text messages, strained smiles for Leo's sake, and the constant gnawing ache of betrayal simmering just beneath the surface. And Ben? He's still playing the victim, the misunderstood martyr, the guy who tried his best. Narcissist. The label screams in my head, a neon sign flashing in the darkness. And yeah, it fits. Fits like a designer suit on a mannequin. Hollow, perfect on the outside, utterly devoid of substance within. My sister, Maya, practically diagnosed him over brunch last week, wielding her psychology degree like a weapon. And honestly, the more I dissect our relationship, the more I see it. The chilling, undeniable pattern of manipulation and self-absorption. Therapy. He mumbled something about therapy, like it was some kind of magic wand that could wave away the wreckage. For Leo, he'd declared, voice dripping with faux concern, the practiced sincerity he uses to charm clients. To charm? Well, to charm anyone who hasn't seen the real Ben, the one lurking beneath the polished facade. But I'm not buying it. Not anymore. Therapy for Ben? That's like asking a shark to attend sensitivity training. He's fundamentally incapable of genuine empathy, of taking responsibility for his actions. Everything is always circumstantial, always someone else's fault, some cosmic conspiracy against him. Never, ever Ben's fault. Never perfect golden boy Ben. So yeah, reconciliation. A ghost story whispered in a hurricane. A fragile, pathetic hope flickering in the face of a raging inferno. But beneath the surface of denial, a cold, hard truth had solidified in my gut. Ben wouldn't change. He fundamentally couldn't, and I was beyond exhausted. Past the point of tears, past the point of anger, just bone-deep, soul-weary exhaustion from years of walking on eggshells, of hoping against hope, of crafting elaborate excuses for his increasingly monstrous behavior. 6 weeks. 6 weeks in the NICU at NYU Langone. Leo was so tiny, a fragile sparrow caught in a storm, fighting for every precious breath. And I was there, a zombie mom tethered to that sterile humming room, day and night, pumping milk like my sanity depended on it, whispering lullabies that felt like desperate pleas to the uncaring universe, watching monitors flash and beep, willing him to just keep fighting, just keep living. 6 weeks of pure, unadulterated hell. And Ben? Where in the goddamn hell was Ben? Supporting me. He'd have the audacity to claim later, with that infuriatingly righteous indignation. Being strong for me. Lies. toxic, festering, gut-wrenching lies. He was strong, all right. Strong enough to find comfort, distraction, and God knows what else in the warm embrace of another woman. The truth detonated in my life like a dirty bomb, a stray text buzzing on his phone while he was at a client dinner. Another euphemism for whatever twisted version of business he was actually conducting in the shadows. Miss you already. Can't wait for tonight. Just those words, seemingly innocuous, but laced with a cloying, saccharine sweetness that made my blood run cold. I shouldn't have looked. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn away, to preserve what little remained of my sanity, to cling to the fragile illusion of normalcy. But I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, a morbid curiosity overriding all reason. And the text thread unfurled before my eyes, a grotesque, sickening tapestry of deceit and betrayal. His personal trainer, some sculpted bronzed goddess he'd met at the gym, someone he'd connected with during this incredibly challenging period. Challenging period? My newborn son was clinging to life by a thread, and his challenge was... what? Not getting enough ego strokes from his wife, who was practically living in the hospital, running on fumes of adrenaline and pure unadulterated terror. Rage. A tsunami of pure incandescent rage. It engulfed me, drowning me, choking me, threatening to consume me whole. I wanted to scream until my vocal cords shredded, to hurl every piece of furniture in the loft through those damn windows, to inflict the same agonizing, soul-crushing pain on him that he'd so casually, so flippantly inflicted on me. But I was weak, physically and emotionally decimated, still bleeding from childbirth. My body a battlefield ravaged by war, my heart a desolate wasteland devoid of hope. And he'd done this. He'd taken a flamethrower to the most vulnerable, exposed, raw version of me, and reduced me to ashes the night we finally brought Leo home. Finally, miraculously, against all odds, brought our precious baby boy into our loft, into his nursery, into the fragile promise of a new beginning. I should have been ecstatic, overwhelmed with relief, with joy, with a profound sense of gratitude. But all I felt was numb, and a glacial, simmering rage that threatened to erupt into a full-blown volcanic explosion at any given moment. Sleep was a cruel, unattainable luxury. I lay in bed, rigid and tense, replaying the texts, the lies, the casual, brutal betrayal, a relentless loop of torment playing on repeat in my mind. And then, in the blackest hours of the night, fueled by a potent cocktail of despair and a toxic need for retribution, I started spiraling down the internet rabbit hole, into the murky, anonymous underbelly of online forums. Stupid? Probably. Self-destructive? Definitely. But I was desperate for some kind of validation, some twisted form of commiseration, some glimmer of understanding in the overwhelming darkness, and I stumbled upon it. Deep within the digital abyss of some anonymous online community, a sanctuary for broken hearts and shattered lives, a place where people poured out their raw, unfiltered pain into the void. Revenge cheating, story after story, confession after confession, of women who'd been eviscerated by infidelity, who'd felt stripped of their worth, reduced to pathetic, insignificant shadows, and who'd decided to fight back, to settle the score, to reclaim some semblance of control in a world that had spun wildly, violently out of their grasp. And the comments. A deafening chorus of voices, a cacophony of judgment and moral condemnation. Two wrongs don't make a right. It's just going to make things infinitely worse. You're stooping to their level, becoming just as bad as they are. The predictable, self-righteous pronouncements of people who had never stared into the abyss of betrayal, had never been reduced to emotional rubble and forced to painstakingly rebuild themselves from the fragments. But then, amidst the noise, there were the other comments, the whispers in the shadows, the defiant cries of women who understood, the ones that resonated with a raw, visceral force deep in the ravaged core of my being, the ones that spoke of empowerment, of reclaiming agency, of finally feeling like they weren't just passive victims, collateral damage in someone else's selfish game. "It wasn't about him," one woman wrote, her words leaping off the screen and searing themselves into my brain. "It was about me. About proving to myself that I wasn't broken beyond repair, that I was still desirable, that I still possessed power, even when he tried to strip me bare and leave me for dead." That's it. A jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity surged through me, jolting me awake from the numbing fog of despair. That's what resonated. That's what clicked into place. It wasn't about Ben. Not really. Not in the grand, cosmic scheme of things. It was about me. About salvaging the remnants of myself from the wreckage he'd created. About proving to myself that I wasn't defined by his infidelity, that I wasn't reduced to a pathetic stereotype in his narcissistic drama. He'd made me feel invisible, worthless, like my pain was irrelevant, like my sacrifice in the NICU, my unwavering love for Leo, meant absolutely nothing to him. And I vehemently refused to let him dictate my self-worth. I refused to allow him to steal the last vestiges of my dignity. So, I did it. I cheated. It wasn't a calculated, cold-blooded act of vengeance, meticulously planned and clinically executed. It was more like a spontaneous combustion, a visceral, primal reaction to years of being emotionally starved, relentlessly dismissed, systematically minimized, chronically taken for granted, relegated to the supporting role in the Ben show, a bit player in the grand production of his self-absorbed life. I went out, into the glittering, seductive chaos of the city, for the first time in what felt like a decade. Maya practically dragged me, kicking and screaming, out of my sweatpants and into a silk dress and stilettos, and marched me downtown to a rooftop bar in Meatpacking, the kind of place Ben would have dismissed as overrated, pretentious, full of vapid social climbers, to, well, anything that wasn't firmly under his control and within his narrow, judgmental worldview. And I met someone. Ethan. He was a revelation. A goddamn revelation. A breath of fresh, intoxicating air in the suffocating, toxic atmosphere of my life. He was attentive, genuinely interested in my thoughts, my feelings, my story, not just waiting impatiently for his turn to dominate the conversation. He was witty, charming, and he had this way of looking at me, like he actually saw past the exhaustion, past the pain, past the armor I'd been wearing for so long, like he saw the real me, the woman I'd almost forgotten existed beneath the layers of motherhood and marital misery. Jessica. A woman with a name, a past, a future, desires, dreams, a heart that had been shattered into a million pieces, but was still, against all odds, stubbornly, defiantly beating. We talked for hours, the city lights twinkling around us like a million fallen stars, the music fading into a background hum, the crowd dissolving into a blur. We talked about everything and nothing: New York, art, music, travel, our passions, our vulnerabilities, the things that made us laugh until our sides ached, the things that haunted our dreams. And then, somehow, organically, inevitably, we were kissing. And then we were back at his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the city spread out beneath us like a glittering, breathtaking tapestry. It wasn't some grand, operatic, earth-shattering affair. It was connection, validation, a lifeline tossed to a drowning woman gasping for air, a desperate primal need to be seen, to be heard, to be touched, to be reminded that I was still alive, still vibrant, still desirable, still worthy of love, even after Ben had tried to convince me otherwise. And yeah, let's strip away the romanticism and face the brutal truth. There was the revenge aspect too. It was inextricably intertwined with the other motivations, a dark, undeniable thread woven into the complex tapestry of my actions. The thought of Ben, completely oblivious, utterly arrogant, strutting through his privileged life, completely, utterly unaware that I had dared to shatter the glass cage he'd constructed around me, that I had reclaimed a piece of myself from the ashes, that I had stepped out of the script he'd written for me. There was a certain grim, almost perverse satisfaction in that, a twisted, dark, undeniably human sense of justice. He'd stolen something from me, something sacred and irreplaceable. My trust, my faith, my sense of security, my belief in the fairy tale we'd built together, my very sense of self. And I'd taken something back, not in the same currency, not in kind, but in power, emotional power, the power to choose, to act, to reclaim my own narrative, to rewrite my own story. I haven't told him, and I won't. It's not about him. It's not about some petty, childish game of tit-for-tat, about rubbing his face in it or escalating the already toxic conflict. He suspects something. I can see it in his eyes, in the way he circles me now, like a predator sensing weakness, a flicker of suspicion, paranoia. He's been different, uncharacteristically solicitous, almost unnervingly attentive, suddenly interested in my schedule, in my social life, in aspects of my existence he used to dismiss with a condescending wave of his hand. Almost jealous. The irony is so thick, so rich, so darkly comedic, it's almost unbearable. He, the serial adulterer, suddenly consumed by the fear of being betrayed. But he hasn't dared to voice his suspicions directly, and I haven't volunteered any information. Let him stew in his own toxic concoction of paranoia and insecurity. Let him wonder, let him squirm, let him taste a fraction of the agonizing uncertainty and soul-crushing doubt he so casually, so cruelly inflicted on me for months, for years. Do I regret it? Honestly, truthfully, deep down in the quiet, hidden chambers of my heart? No, not really. Not in the way I anticipated. There's a part of me that feels lighter, unburdened, like a crushing weight has been lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to stand upright again. I know, intellectually, that two wrongs don't magically transform into a right, and I'm not proud of cheating. It's not a badge of honor I'll be wearing anytime soon, not something I ever envisioned myself doing. But in this specific, convoluted, heartbreakingly unfair situation, it was a necessary evil. It was a desperate, almost primal act of self-preservation, a way to claw my way back from the precipice of despair, to pull myself back from the brink of oblivion. Maybe it's morally ambiguous. Maybe it's ethically questionable. Maybe it's selfish, impulsive, a sign of immaturity. But it was mine. My choice. My agency. My power, reclaimed from the wreckage of our marriage. And in a world where I felt like I had absolutely no control over anything, where my life had been hijacked and rewritten by someone else's callous indifference, that small act of defiance, that reclaiming of my own will, meant everything. The storm has finally passed. The rain has subsided, leaving the city glistening and cleansed. A fragile dawn is breaking over the Brooklyn skyline, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. Leo is still sleeping soundly, his tiny breaths a gentle rhythm in the quiet loft. And for the first time, in what feels like forever, I feel like I can actually breathe. Like maybe, just maybe, I'll not only survive this, but I'll actually thrive. I'll be okay. Even if Ben never changes, even if our future is nothing more than a messy, complicated co-parenting arrangement, even if the road ahead is uncertain and daunting and fraught with challenges, I'll be okay, because I took my power back, and in that act of rebellion, I found myself again. And that, for me, was absolutely everything.